session for the knitted star. So hopefully by now you have a bunch of your knitted star blocks. It should look like that. So we left off with each of the 4 quadrants. All you need to do now is add these sashing segments with a little center square in there. What I'm going to focus on today is I'm going to show you how to cut some of them in half that you're going to need for your setting triangles, because this is the scary part. Otherwise, all you need is some of your sashing. That is your background, whatever color your background is. Mine happens to be white. And then your cornerstones for your sashing. So mine happens to be gray for my quilt. And so you're going to, as you go along, make sashing segments dependent on each row is going to add a little bit more. Kind of shows it in the diagram. So as I'll show you, this is one where it's, so I have 1, 2, 3 cornerstones because there will be 2 squares against it. And you just kind of add those into the rows as you go. But like I said, I'm going to focus on cutting the square part because that is really the scary part. And then once I get this quilt done, I'll post it and you can kind of see it more up close and personal. So here we go. I'm going to move this camera. I got a new toy, so we're going to see how this works. Okay. So here's my full square. And it's a really big square. Okay, guys. So here's how I did mine. I know it's really scary, but it's not so bad and it works in the end. Hopefully you might be able to see some of this. So ideally what I'm doing here is I'm taking my really big, this is my 24.5-inch ruler, and I'm lining it up through all where these squares intersect. Okay, so I'm lining up as best as I can. Keep in mind, as I go, I can tug on it or try to use, I'll use a fingernail and try to scoot some to make sure they do line up. Like this lines up, but that one doesn't. So I'm going to try to just work it through so that in the end they all meet up. Just because now that it's not on the ironing board and those kinds of things, some things kind of poof up where they shouldn't. They try to shift where they don't. And so they just need a little nudging to behave. And it may not be exactly perfect. This is where you're going to have to kind of let some of that go. Because in the end, this side is the edge of your quilt. So your binding is going to cover over some of this. And on the other 2 sides, seam allowance takes some in. So let's not stress too much if you don't quite get on each and every intersection here. Because in the end, like I said, binding is going to cover that up. So you're not going to know. How I did mine is I'm only cutting towards about the halfway section because the ruler is not as long as the block. So what I had to do is just kind of cut part way. And then I shifted. So I pulled it and then lined up the second half. So I'm trying to keep my square as much together as possible, lining up. So back here is where I cut it. And then I'm lining up what I have not cut yet. And so as you can tell, I'm going to kind of give it some pull and some push in some areas just to try to get everything to line up. And then we're going to do it. Cut it. Call it good. It's not perfect, but you know what? It is what it is. I didn't quite. Got a nick apparently in my blade. And this is why it's important to change your blade often, because that just gets frustrating. All right, so now I have 2. And what happens is you'll take, when you start putting your first corner together, you're going to take 2 different colors. So say these guys. And you're going to put, if I can find him, a single sashing. So this is a sashing with 1 gray square. So I'm going to start with this, and I'm going to sew it in here. And in the end, let's get you down there. So this part This will eventually get trimmed. So yeah, it sticks out a little and it's kind of weird, but that's okay. In the end, we're going to trim it up with the quilt, okay? Some breaking things here. So you'll start doing sashing like that, and then as you're going across, seal that together, and then you'll have, say, this 3-part sashing that would then fit in. Okay, so you'll have little cornerstones between your stars, and then you'll start having full squares in your next set of rows with sashing pieces in between them. And these sashing pieces are going to be the plain ones without the gray squares, because your gray squares are going to be in this lineup. So when you start putting these squares together, you are going to have some plain ones that aren't going to need the gray. So that's how it will start to come together. Hopefully that made sense for you guys. Like I said, it's scary, but it's doable. You're really going to want a really big ruler. So make sure if you don't have a big 24.5-inch ruler, invest in one. It's worthwhile. It doesn't have to be the 8.5-inch like I have. You really want a super long one, because there's just projects that you need it. So it's definitely worth the investment. Just do it. And then just have confidence. Just lay it out, line up that ruler, trim, scoot it, trim again. It'll be okay. It'll all come out in the end. Everything will be good. And otherwise, you're just going to put everything together and be done with it. Yay! We're at the end of this one. It was a struggle, but you know what? It's super pretty. So it's worth all the hassle. All right, guys? So otherwise, have a fabulous Friday. You guys keep on stitching.